War II is finally over. Europe is just a wreck. The Nazi high command, they've been captured. And the Allies, the victors, they're left with this massive, unprecedented question. And look, this wasn't just about getting revenge. The real question was, how does civilization itself even begin to respond to crimes this calculated, this devastating? I mean, these acts were so horrific, they almost broke the idea of law itself. The world had just never seen anything on this scale before. So they had a pretty stark choice to make. On one hand, you've got vengeance. Summary executions. Quick, simple. Some people, like the British, at first, were all for it. But then, there was this other idea, a new path. What if we hold back? What if, instead of lining them up against a wall, we put them in a courtroom and make them face the law? And you have to understand, this was a totally radical idea at the time. Justice on this scale had always come from the barrel of a gun. Now it was going to come from a judge's gavel. Okay, so the Allies chose the path of law. And the place they picked for this special court? Oh, it was loaded with symbolism. They chose Nuremberg. Yeah, that Nuremberg. The very same city where the Nazis held their enormous theatrical propaganda rallies. It was the cradle of their power. So the Allies picked it to be the symbol of its end. And the court they set up, the International Military Tribunal, was about to do something revolutionary. The goal wasn't just to blame Germany. No, it was to hold individual people responsible for their actions. This totally flipped the script on how international law worked. All right, so the prosecution laid out its case with 4 main charges. They were really trying to cover the entire scope of what the Nazis did. Now, the first 3, conspiracy, crimes against peace, and good old-fashioned war crimes, those were more or less based on existing legal concepts. But that 4th one, that was something brand new, and honestly, it was desperately needed. And here it is, crimes against humanity. This was the game changer. It was this groundbreaking new legal idea that came out of the trials. It had to be invented because, think about it, how do you legally prosecute the Holocaust? How do you deal with a government systematically murdering its own civilian population? The existing laws of war just didn't have an answer for that. This new charge, it finally gave them one. 22. That's how many of Nazi Germany's top surviving leaders were put in the dock. We're talking about the architects of the war, the men who organized the Holocaust. Now, of course, the big names, Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels, they'd already taken their own lives. But the men sitting in that courtroom, they were the absolute top brass of the Third Reich that was left. So the trial kicks off on November 20th, 1945, and it really had 2 huge goals. Goal number 1, convict the guilty. Pretty straightforward. But goal number 2 was arguably just as important, to create a historical record so detailed, so undeniable that no one in the future could ever claim it didn't happen. And the best part? They were going to do it using the Nazis' own meticulous records against them. And the chief U.S. prosecutor, Justice Robert Jackson, gave this incredible opening statement. He basically said, look, this isn't just about punishing these specific men. This is about defending civilization itself. He made this powerful argument that just by holding a trial at all, instead of resorting to summary executions, it was, and this is a great line, one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason. So for almost a full year, that courtroom became this incredible stage for justice. The prosecution just kept bringing out a mountain of evidence, thousands of captured Nazi documents detailing their own crimes in their own words. And what was the defense's main argument? Well, it pretty much boiled down to one thing. We were just following orders. They tried to pin everything on Hitler, who was conveniently dead. But you know, you can argue about documents, you can try to explain away orders. What came next, though? There was no arguing with it. The prosecution played a film. Just raw, horrifying footage that Allied soldiers had shot when they liberated the concentration camps. And suddenly, the whole courtroom went silent. You had these flickering images of skeletal survivors, of piles of bodies. The horror wasn't some abstract concept anymore. It was right there on the screen. It was real, it was undeniable, and even Hermann Göring, Hitler's arrogant second-in-command, reportedly had to look away. Okay, so after all those months of testimony, all that gut-wrenching evidence, it was finally time for the verdict. Let's get into how this historic trial actually ended and what it meant for the future. So on October 1st, 1946, the judgments were read. Out of the 22 defendants, 19 were convicted of something. The breakdown was pretty stark. You had 3 men acquitted, a few who got prison sentences, but 12 of them, we're talking the top political and military leaders, were sentenced to death by hanging. But the story doesn't quite end there. Even in defeat, the defiance was just staggering. The night he was supposed to be executed, Hermann Göring, the highest-ranking Nazi on trial, cheated the hangman. He bit down on a hidden cyanide capsule. He even left a note, basically mocking the court, saying he wouldn't be hanged like a common criminal. In the end, he escaped the court's final sentence. So yeah, Göring escaped the noose, but he couldn't escape history. And that's the thing. The real legacy of Nuremberg wasn't just about punishing those specific men. It was about laying down rules for the future. It created the foundation for modern international law. The big idea is that leaders, individuals, can be held personally accountable for their actions. The old, I was just following orders excuse, it wasn't going to fly anymore. For the very first time, the world had a legal tool to go after the people responsible for the absolute worst crimes imaginable. Look, Nuremberg was a total landmark moment. It was the start of a whole new era for international justice. But it wasn't the finish line, not at all. It was the starting line. It set a new standard, and it left all of us, every generation since, with this one massive, lingering question. Has the world really lived up to that standard?